You're listening to The Voice of Russia with me, Juliet Spare. There are claims too many smart British graduates are leaving the UK to work abroad and that the UK is suffering from a so-called brain drain. The Member of Parliament making these claims joins me here in London. Nick de Bois is the Conservative MP for Enfield North. And joining in the debate about whether Britain's economy is suffering as a result of professionals moving abroad is Felix Mitchell, co-founder and director of Instant Impact, which is a graduate recruitment company based in the UK. And Dr. Brad Blitz, who's a professor of human and political geography at Kingston University. And down the line from Hong Kong is primary school teacher Rudi Dray, who left the UK at the beginning of the economic crisis in 2008 to work abroad. Now, recent Home Office figures suggest in the last decade, between 2001 and 2011, more than 3.5 million people left the UK, and nearly 2 million of those who left were aged between 25 and 44. Mr. de Bois, why do you think then that Britain is suffering from this so-called brain drain?
Well, I think in addition to those figures, the Home Office themselves demonstrated through a study that probably about half of those leaving Britain are from the managerial or professional classes. So there's a suggestion there that is happening. I think the challenge is in Britain for us not to entirely accept those statistics at face value because they will hide some other things. But the fact is that there has been a very significant increase in people migrating from the UK. The frustration is in the migration debate. We're often focused on immigration and who's coming in. And I felt it was right that we looked at who's leaving and put that into context, if we can, into the economic cost to the UK.
We'll come to you, I think, Rudy. Can you explain to us why you left the UK?
About 4 years ago, myself and my young family, my son, who was just about 1 at the time, and my wife, decided to leave the UK because we were finding it quite difficult to live with a young family, to pay rent as well as save. And we felt that maybe looking elsewhere, looking abroad, we might have more benefits. And certainly that's come to fruition when we've moved to Hong Kong. And we're both primary school teachers, myself and my wife. And we get quite a lot of benefits now that we wouldn't get in the UK. For example, larger salaries and performance-related bonuses and much better tax breaks as well as childcare for our sons.
So you'd certainly agree that your current standard of living in Hong Kong is a better standard of living that you were living in the UK? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for example, the standard of education is a lot higher. There seems to be a sort of a stronger work ethic, and the sort of public perception of teachers in our profession is much higher out here than it is in the UK. So, as well as being based somewhere where we've got a nice travel base for the rest of Asia. We also have beaches and other national parks and islands on our doorstep. So the standard of living is a lot higher in terms of those things, as well as just the financial benefits. So we certainly see ourselves living here a lot longer at the moment.
Do you not think then there's a choice that people make to live abroad, not just on economic decisions, but because they might have a perspective in life that they want to travel the world and see more of it than perhaps staying in the same country that they grew up in? So it's that perception that you want to tackle as well, Nick?
Well, I don't think it's a question of tackling it. I accept that there are lots of reasons why someone may want to leave. I mean, when I was writing the first blog on this, it was snowing and it was cold and it was miserable. You can quite understand some of the non-financial criteria for going. What I recognise is we are in a global marketplace. Its freedom of movement of labour is very easy, and people are right to look where they can best exploit their opportunities. I'd just say to policymakers is that perhaps we should be thinking when we're setting policy, be it just around taxation or other issues, we should bear in mind that if our own people who've spent many years here learning and training, and it won't be everyone who's leaving the country will be in that category, but they've made an investment. We, the country, the taxpayer, have made an investment. Let's try and make it attractive to persuade them to stay here as well.
You are Felix Mitchell. You run a graduate recruitment company.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit and tell us a little bit about the sort of quandaries and questions graduates are coming to you now with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about the state of graduate employment in the UK. I think, I can't really speak to, let's just say 1 in 10 graduates at the moment are in work abroad after 6 months after they leave university. That's a number that I wasn't expecting when I started to do the research. But I think what we are seeing is that they will have different reasons for going. You know, they might be in a training contract with a big company that takes them to New York or to Hong Kong. They might want to do a little bit of adventure work, if you will, after university. Myself, when I left, I went to California to work in Jerry Brown's campaign for governor for 5 months. I always thought that I'd be returning to the UK, and I did. I learnt useful skills when I left. That I used when I returned, and I thought that the whole thing was beneficial to me and to whoever was going to be my next employer, which turned out to be myself. But I would say that what these statistics don't show is why people are leaving and what they do afterwards, whether they're returning, and also what they do when they do return, if they return for the long term. I think that's a very important thing that they don't go into.
Dr. Blitz, we've talked about the Home Office statistics and the recent statistics that Felix mentions there. Can you paint the current picture then of how many Britons are actually leaving the UK to find work elsewhere?
Well, the picture that I'll present is based on data provided by the Office of National Statistics and then assembled by the Migration Observatory based at the University of Oxford. And if we look at the 2011 figures, in 2011, 351,000 people migrated from the UK. Of this, about just under, about 40% were Brits. 149,000 of these were Brits. Where were they going to? Most of the people who left went to the EU and Commonwealth countries. Then you have a number of people moving to Australia, not even 50,000 people, it's about 48,000 people estimated. And then the Middle East, and then the USA. Smaller numbers going to South Africa. So people going to different parts of the world for very different reasons. And when surveyed in terms of why they were leaving, what were their reasons for going, above all was jobs. To some extent it was also to be reacquainted with family members, but also the projected duration varied as well. So the data just give us a sort of a snapshot. And the data themselves are imperfect because the Office of National Statistics gathers information using the International Passenger Survey, where only a fraction of those who leave are ever sampled. So we really don't have a handle on the numbers of people who are ever leaving. But we do know that people are coming into the country constantly and people are returning as Felix has.
Nick, you're nodding with agreement there.
Well, I do agree about the collection of the data because actually I think, frankly, it's easy. We collect more data on someone shopping in a supermarket than we do the people coming in and out of the country. And that is absolutely ridiculous when it can have such significance in policy making. I think the point that worries me is not just the numbers, but the type of professions that are leaving. And for example, if you're going to North America where you will do a lot of biochemistry and pharmaceutical work, if you would go to New England and Boston around there, the average tenure is about 10 to 12 years. Now, it's absolutely true. At the other end of the scale, some people are going away for 1, 2, maybe 3 years. Now, my argument is that that's a skill set that I would be worried about if I was losing, particularly when the government policy and the growth agenda is about bringing pharmaceutical and biochemical companies over here. So to persuade someone to come here, you've got to have the skill sets to fulfill it. And I would argue that a lot of that is on our own doorstep, as well as obviously benefiting from people coming from elsewhere.
Go on, Felix.
Sorry, I think you have to look at the. I mean, I agree with you that a lot of jobs in pharma and aerospace are moving abroad. You also have to look at the jobs, the sort of skill sets that we don't have here, and so just so you can see the balance. So one thing that I often do see is that, for example, with maths, computer science, and engineering degrees, the UK graduates maybe have a dearth of that skill set, and we're getting sort of a large proportion of people getting those jobs in high-tech industries in the UK on the graduate side of things, they come from abroad to the very from the very markets that you're saying that our graduates are going over to. So a lot of people that we're placing, for example, in development jobs, sort of app jobs, sort of across that whole high-tech space, they're coming from India, they're coming from China, some of them are coming from America. So I think to see this, yes, some of our skill sets are being lost abroad, but this whole sort of loosening of the sort of employment market globally can be positive for our economy as well as for others.
I agree, and politicians do make the claim that Boris Johnson, I think, wants to open up London to India and China and get the best and cream off the talent, so that they can look at the UK as somewhere that they could win the Nobel Peace Prize and that they could all arrive here. So is there not some sort of level of swap shop that we're not losing, but we are gaining as well in the UK?
Yes, I'm not being a little Englander by raising this prospect by any means. What I would say, though, is in response to the idea of the global swap of skill sets, start to match that with the industries we want here that are going to drive the growth, not just for the next 2 or 3 years, but the next 5 or 10 years. My argument is, yes, of course we should be bringing in people from outside who've got those skill sets that we don't have. But when it comes to shaping policy, ask yourself why you don't have those skills and put the policies in place that hopefully will drive them. And in the meantime, don't hemorrhage, maybe that's a slightly pejorative term, but don't lose that skill set that you spent years of investing in here, not by compelling them to stay, by making it attractive for them to stay, by bringing the right industries and having the right fiscal policies around it. So I'm saying let's fight Britain's corner a little bit in this and not just rely on a swap.
Felix, go ahead.
So I think the point that's being made there is it's less about the skill sets and more about the industries here to satisfy those skill sets. It's not so much about losing your sort of biochemistry PhD. It's more about having interesting and cutting edge roles in UK companies where they can exploit their own skill set here. Which
is the point about, if there's nothing here, people are going to go elsewhere. If there's limited choice here, they're going to go elsewhere. Then you factor in the other ingredients that we've talked about, from lifestyle, quality of education for their children, taxes, etc., and cost of living. That's the whole pool that policymakers need to make, because there's no point in producing lots of biochemists if we've got nothing for them to do.
We're going to come to you, Dr. Blitz, then. Obviously, if we, as Nick suggests, collating data on how you shop more than whether you come in and out of the UK, how are we going to get data that's accurate on who's leaving and who's arriving, and how that will benefit the economy in a negative or positive effect? Felix is coming from the sort of positive swapping of expertise. Nick comes from a let's fight the British corner on this. Rudy's already in Hong Kong.
I think the United Kingdom is getting better in terms of collecting data in any case. And I think to draw upon what Felix said, I think, look, there are a number of gains that result from this global migration market. And certainly, from the perspective of the British government, yes, we should be finding ways of attracting and retaining the best possible talent. But that's what makes for a competitive market. And the reasons why we may be losing talent, partially they're personal, but also they're structural. And they relate to the fact that there's been underinvestment in research and development in critical areas. And now the policy is catching up. And now there's the sense of, wait a minute, what are we going to do? And that's why we see much more debate around STEM subjects in schools and universities, the need for there to be greater investment in precisely in maths, engineering, and the like, subjects which had been relatively neglected. And so it really does come down to finding ways to invest in critical industries. And that starts much sooner, actually much years before people actually start to think about emigrating.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. And I'm joined on the phone from Hong Kong by a primary school teacher, Rudi Dray, who left the UK in 2008 to work abroad. Dr. Brad Blitz, a professor of human and political geography at Kingston University. Felix Mitchell, co-founder and director of a graduate recruitment company. And Conservative MP making the claim that Britain's suffering from a brain drain is Nick de Bois,
Let's just take something that's extremely topical now, this advanced engineering. We're talking about expanding a high-speed rail network through the United Kingdom at the moment, all right? So I'd like to think that there's a lot of skill set, homegrown skill set to deal with that. But if we're going to attract investors and inward investors into this country to set the companies up that will use the skill sets that we're talking about, we've also got to do something else as well as address the structural issue. The whole language of government has to change at the moment, and this is one of my great concerns. At the moment, if you look at perhaps Rudy, who's out there, gone to Hong Kong, he looked around, I'm guessing, and thought, there's years of debt to pay in this country. There's going to be a lot of problems facing us. I'm quite depressed as it is. And everyone's telling me that, I might as well call it a day because life is so bleak and grim. And what do someone who's got talent, I want to look after myself, my family, and get the best possible I can for them. At the moment, the language coming from our leaders in many walks of life is not painting a picture of the medium-term future. We all know the next 2 or 3 years, and a bit longer, sadly, is going to be pretty tough. We need to share a vision of what we want this country to be and how it will reward aspiration, ingenuity and innovation, not just for the companies and the businesses, but the individuals themselves. Who in business is going to want to invest here when every day you pick up a paper or listen to the newspaper saying, we don't like you making profits, we're going to tax you even more? We have to set an agenda for the future.
Rudy, would you ever contemplate moving back?
Obviously, you tend to want to put back in what you've taken from the country, and we still have a very strong affinity to the UK, and our children consider themselves British, even though we're living abroad. So I think at the moment we certainly see ourselves coming back one day because of our strong links, especially with family and friends. But at the moment, economically, it's just not viable for us. And while we've got young children and have childcare over here, for example, which is it's very affordable and of extremely high standard, those sort of things are not comparable in the UK. So we know that our standard of living and lifestyle, if we were back in London, we wouldn't have as much money and enough time with our children, for example.
Dr. Blitz, then, you in some ways agree with then Rudy's dilemma as to why he's staying out there?
Well, look, obviously it's deplorable that someone should have to think that because childcare is just so unaffordable in this country, I'm going to have to look abroad. At the same time, I think it's extremely encouraging that Rudy is saying, well, look, one day I do want to return. And just to illustrate this, my daughter goes to an international school. Several of her teachers are non-British, and even those who are British, they've worked and taught abroad, and they bring back a wealth of experience. And when you think of the experiences that Rudy's children are getting by living abroad, that's fantastic. I mean, this will really stand them in far greater stead when they come back to the UK and they grow up, and they'll have an altogether broader perspective. And I think that's something which we do want to encourage.
I think that's a very good point, Felix.
I think absolutely. For the sort of age range that I deal with, Rudy, I would imagine a little bit earlier, sort of on in their life stage than you, without kids, not married. I think that it can be very, very beneficial to them to go abroad and to work for a few years, both to get that sort of cultural side of things that you were mentioning before, but also there's a real benefit professionally. If you do sort of 2 years abroad working in China, for example, I think you're a very, very employable asset when you come back to the UK, not only because of that 2 years, but also for your understanding of their business practices and in terms of sort of really even in terms of how they think in a business sense.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. I'm joined in the studio by Felix Mitchell, a co-founder and director of a graduate recruitment company. Dr. Brad Blitz, a professor of human and political geography at Kingston University. On the phone from Hong Kong, primary school teacher Rudi Dray, who left the UK in 2008. And Nick de Bois, the Conservative MP, claiming that Britain is suffering from a brain drain.
Absolutely nothing wrong with what Felix said there. But the reality is at the moment it's a little bit the other way around. We've got lots of Chinese people coming over here to be educated. They're developing their skill sets in things that we're intellectually leaders in. And of course, we're funding that because we borrow so much money off places like China. Our actual debt interest payments are funding their structural economic growth and education. So that's what's a little bit frustrating. Politicians back here have got to compete in the global marketplace like anyone else when it comes to actually making this an attractive place to keep people to stay. So it is, yes, in part about the language you use, and it's about the motivation and the aspiration for this country, which as leaders it's their job to do. But it's also about policy. Look, childcare policies, we are way behind in some areas. We've got a great new minister in Liz Truss now, who's actually looked abroad, seen what other countries are doing, and is going to change it to make it more affordable by reducing some of the inherent regulations around it. And we are funding people in the low who've got really young children in childcare. It's part of a picture, though. It's not going to be one single policy that's going to do that. And I welcome that, but we've got to, we're running out of years.
Does it feel then the UK is a bit of a step behind? Because I think what you say, Dr. Blitz, about Rudy's children, and Rudy, you can agree or disagree, but having that experience and growing up in Hong Kong and learning effortlessly another language will stand your children in better stead, or will make them more employable in the future by being bilingual or in the global world they live in. Does that ever cross your mind, Rudy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for example, my oldest son, who's 5, is learning Mandarin at school, and he's part of an international curriculum, and he's mixing and is being educated with children from all around Europe, as well as China and Hong Kong based as well, with lots of different backgrounds. So I think something like that, for him to be more open-minded and internationally minded, I think that's going to be it's going to be fantastic for when he gets older. And even if he is returning to the UK, I think it's going to be more desirable to someone looking on a CV or looking at an experience to employ him in the future.
So obviously we've talked about why you moved out there, and I think that I probably think that you're one of the braver of your friend group moving out there for your children for a higher salary. Was it a very difficult decision to make in terms of the amount of your life that you had to uproot, your sort of friends and family? Because I would think, on a personal sense, that would be the thing that would put me off leaving the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Felix, the biggest stepping stone is just making that break, because you're leaving so much behind, and it was the biggest thing we did, the biggest move that we'd made. And once we got over here, and you realise a place like Hong Kong has so many expatriates, people who've done that, made the move, and instantly you're in a community of people who are like-minded and who understand that, and then you start the extra benefits that we never really appreciated started coming along. So, for example, we knew that we'd be on a higher salary, but then we get out here and we find that the transport is cheap and it's efficient, and crime is very low, and those sort of things start adding to the picture, and then all of a sudden our roots are getting stronger and stronger in a place like Hong Kong for us to come back.
Well, I suppose I'll bring the debate back round to Nick now, because obviously you're campaigning, or you're wanting to be heard, that you think there is the British economy will be damaged if we don't, or politicians don't do something about a brain drain. But then Rudy gives a very strong argument as to why Hong Kong is better to live than Britain.
Hey, I'm with Rudy. I can understand why he's made those choices, and thousands of people are making those choices. This isn't about the individual and the choice. It's about us trying to redress the balance so it actually starts to look quite attractive not to uproot yourself. I think you asked a very good question there, Felix, and Rudy said, yes, it's not the easiest thing in the world to up sticks and go. So our job is obviously to just leave that little bit more incentive for people to consider staying here. But they've got to have practical, real reasons to do that, as well as we show the leadership to do it. What is very interesting is I don't think, and none of the data as I've dug down into it, has demonstrated people are leaving just because tax rates may be better. It's not that simple by any means. There are quality of life issues and maybe disposable income issues when you get out there, but it's not as crude as that. That again would be just part of the package. So no, I don't hold it against the Rudis and his contemporaries. I think it's perfectly understandable. I just want to compete to help them stay here.
I don't think Britain really is suffering from a brain drain. The only thing I would want to add is that I think it's really important just to ensure that there are policies and practices in place to ensure that when people return, or should people want to return, that they can do so, and that they can come back, they can set up businesses, that they can re-enter professions, and that it is not such an onerous situation that they might decide against it. I think ultimately a strong economy needs to make it friendly for such people to return.
Well, I suppose the final word for me, in terms of graduates leaving the country, would be the fact that a very good graduate will be able to find a job in the UK. I think, as you said before, there are definitely, everyone has their own reasons for leaving. Some people for longer, some people for shorter. In my experience with the clients that I work with, are the SME companies that we place our graduates in. They're finding the graduates with the skill set through us. They've obviously struggled a little bit to find graduates themselves, but again, that can be for an absolute huge number of reasons. One of the best things about America that I experienced when I was out there was that doing well beyond your years, setting up a company, for example, or getting promoted before your time, was always celebrated. Whereas I feel that here in the UK, we have a bit of a culture of going along a set career path. And I think if we really do want to bring industries and innovations to the UK, we really need to start celebrating the entrepreneur and the innovator a little bit more than we do.
Just a thought. There may not be, as has been suggested, a brain drain now, but let's just accept that 2 million people between 25 and 44 are leaving this country, of which a large proportion are what we would say entirely homegrown. The fact is, with the picture that's been painted for the next 5 to 10 years, I expect that to increase. That's the threat. That's the danger, in my opinion, and the policymakers need to address that now.
And Rudy, I want to come to you now. Do you have any regrets?
Not at the moment, Juliet, but I think that there's an emotional part of us who always feel an attachment, and whereas we've only been away for a couple of years, I think we sort of see ourselves here in the near future. So it would be lovely to think that we could come back and things in England might look a bit better than they certainly are at the moment, and that would be wonderful for us and certainly our children in the years to come.
And Nick de Bois, what would you say to those graduates that have gone?
I'd want them. I'd want to be saying to those people, bring your skill sets back here that you've developed and that you've learned abroad. And when you do come back here, realise you will be coming back to a country that will celebrate your achievement, encourage greater time, greater success for you here, and ensure that you're rewarded not just financially through what I hope will be more significant tax policies, but actually rewarded in making a part to rebuilding and rebalancing the economy for Britain, which is no longer going to be utterly dependent on services, financial services, but bringing back those skills of engineering, of biochemistry, of pharmaceuticals, the skill sets, the education, the teachers, bring it back here and let's make our country fit for this century.
Dr. Blitz.
Anything that can be done to promote a can-do attitude. I too spent years in California. I do know the way Americans do this, and I dare say that the ethic that Rudy has spoken about, that he's been exposed to in Asia, this is great. And Britain does need to welcome such people and realize that it is on the back of people that success is built.
I'd like to thank all my guests, Nick de Bois, the Conservative MP, Felix Mitchell, co-founder and director of a graduate recruitment company, Dr. Brad Blitz, a professor of human and political geography at Kingston University, and on the phone from Hong Kong, primary school teacher Rudy Dray.